RT looks into the ways in which foreign mercenaries are coming to Ukraine, financing their gear and who they are aligned with. RT's Steve Sweeney brings us the details.
A British mercenary in Ukraine has called for Russian troops to surrender or die after his attempts to raise funds for killer drones were thwarted. Mesa Gifford, real name Harry Rowe, issued the appeal on Twitter, claiming that the Ukrainian soldiers he is fighting alongside were closing in on Moscow's forces.
And listen on the radio as village after village is liberated from the Russians.
Just days previously, he had launched a fundraiser for a drone which he said would drop thousands of grenades on Russians, offering donors the opportunity to write a message on the deadly payload. According to Gifford, the drone was to be named after fellow mercenary Aidin Aslin, also known as Cossack Gundy, who was recently released under an amnesty after being sentenced to death by a Donetsk court. The pair know each other from their time in Syria, where they fought with Kurdish militia alongside US occupying forces. But the fundraising platform pulled the plug on the drone appeal after RT raised its concerns, raising questions over breaches of international law on the procurement of weapons. Gifford, who boasts of connections to British and US intelligence services, has openly professed a desire to emulate the pseudo-humanitarian organisation, the White Helmets, which is accused of false flag ops and support for jihadist groups in Syria, through his ominously named Nightingale Squadron. But he and Aslin are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to mercenaries fighting against Russia in Ukraine. RT has uncovered a shady network of guns for hire who are organised in so-called NGOs and charities who are potentially deceiving their donors. Here, we focus on just a few. One of those organisations is the Spearhead Foundation, a mental health charity for former British soldiers which, according to its website, has a team based in Ukraine. It has been working alongside Chris Swampy Garrett, a former British soldier who has been part of the neo-Nazi Azov battalion since the 2014 Maidan coup. He appears to be one of the main linchpins in Ukraine, with many of the British mercenaries pictured alongside him. The Spearhead Foundation founder Craig Monaghan refused to answer questions over the charity's activities in Ukraine. However, the charity's website pictures him with Garrett training Kiev's forces in a church. And, according to the charity's homepage, it has been working with the so-called Georgian Legion, which has been accused of the torture and execution of Russian POWs. Listed among the foundation's donors are the Edgar Brothers, an arms company which has won at least £5.5 million worth of contracts from the Ministry of Defence. Earlier this year, the Dark Angels, led by former British squaddy Daniel Burke, was revealed to have fired an £80,000 Javelin missile at Russian tanks.
A four-man team went kilometres into no man's land with a Javelin anti-tank missile which they fired at a Russian armoured vehicle.
His former unit came to prominence when it was revealed that its soldiers had used images of then Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn as target practice.
The soldiers of the Parachute Regiment routinely carry out target practice. On this occasion, they filmed themselves and posted on social media. The headline, "Happy with that," suggests they've hit the target. Then footage reveals Jeremy Corbyn is apparently that target.
Burke and others in the Dark Angels also served with Kurdish forces in Syria. This includes Mark Ayres, who says he accidentally joined Azov in Bucha and says they weren't bad people.
By accident I joined the Azov unit. That would have been my last choice of a unit to go to, but I'm pretty glad I did. They're not the monsters and psychos that I would envisage neo-Nazis to be. I mean, they're not all like that. A lot of them are decent guys, just with stupid views.
Ayres previously served time in jail for a brutal armed robbery while AWOL from the British Army, seeking to use the cash to go and fight in Bosnia. The Dark Angels too had their Just Giving page removed for violating the terms and conditions of the platform. Begging the question, just who is funding the operations of British mercenaries inside Ukraine? And who is supplying their weapons? According to Russia, thousands of foreign nationals have flocked to Ukraine since President Zelensky called for a so-called international brigade to join the fight in February. While the legal situation remains a grey area under international law, those fighting in what Moscow deems to be a proxy war are able to leave and enter Ukraine freely. The mercenaries have simply swapped one conflict zone for another, claiming to fight for Kurdish autonomy in Syria, but then fighting against autonomy for Russian speakers in Ukraine. But while their former Kurdish allies have washed their hands of them, going as far as saying they don't even know Aslin, Pinner and Gifford, they have support in high places. British Prime Minister Liz Truss has previously stated her support for individuals that want to fight in Ukraine.
So you support Britain, people from Britain, going over to Ukraine to help in the fight?
Absolutely, if that's what they want to do.
And while she was forced to roll back the comments when she was Foreign Secretary, Truss now sits in the top job and leaves no question on her desire for a Ukrainian victory.
We will stand with our Ukrainian friends, however long it takes. Ukraine can win, Ukraine must win, and Ukraine will win.
We reached out to the British government for comment, but they have so far not responded. Its continued silence means that mercenaries operate with impunity and the tacit support of Downing Street, leaving them free to commit atrocities unhindered, perhaps even state-sanctioned, as the West continues to add fuel to the fire in Ukraine.
Well, that wraps up this news hour.